Just when everyone thought Captain Ibrahim Traoré's security was impenetrable, a shocking new conspiracy to eliminate him has come to light, more sophisticated and dangerous than any before. Shadows move again in Ouagadougou. The relative calm that had settled over Ouagadougou after the arrival of North Korean commandos and the consequent decrease in overt coup attempts began to be disturbed by a series of subtle but disturbing incidents that initially seemed unrelated, mere coincidences in the complex routine of a country undergoing transformation. Small pockets of unrest in peripheral markets, inexplicable failures in the communications systems of loyal military units, and the appearance of anonymous pamphlets with increasingly virulent criticism of the government of Captain Ibrahim Traoré were like small cracks in a dam, foreshadowing a growing and invisible pressure. Commander Omar, the head of presidential security and a man of keen instincts honed by years of fighting insurgency and political intrigue, was among the first to sense that something more sinister was afoot. He noticed a pattern in these seemingly isolated incidents, a subtle coordination that suggested a hidden hand, smarter and more patient than previous conspirators. It was not the sound of an impending coup but the tense silence of a carefully laid ambush, a trap slowly closing around the president. Intelligence reports, both from internal sources and from a few external allies who still maintained discreet communication channels with Burkina Faso, began to point to a new coalition of opposition forces. This time, it was not just disgruntled military men or ambitious politicians looking for an opportunity. The new threat seemed to involve a broader and more dangerous coalition, uniting elements of the old political and economic elite, who had lost their privileges under Traoré's reforms, with experienced foreign mercenaries and, most worryingly, with possible dissidents within the president's own circle of trust. The sophistication of the new plot was what most alarmed Commander Omar. The conspirators seemed to have learned from their previous failures, avoiding electronic communications that could be intercepted and using more traditional, hard-to-trace methods of contact, such as human messengers and complex codes. They also seemed to have intimate knowledge of the president's routine, habits, and vulnerabilities, information that could only have come from someone with very close access to the palace or its immediate surroundings. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, upon being informed of Omar's suspicions, reacted with the seriousness and determination that characterized him, but without showing panic. He knew that his leadership was a beacon of hope for many, but also a constant target for those who wanted a return to the status quo of corruption and submission to foreign interests. The idea of a new conspiracy, more elaborate and possibly with traitors in his own midst, was painful, but it did not paralyze him. On the contrary, it strengthened his resolve to protect his people and his project at any cost. The investigation began in absolute secrecy, involving only a handful of officers who were most trusted by Omar and Traoré, and very discreetly, some of the most experienced North Korean counterintelligence commandos. Any leak could be fatal, alerting the conspirators and allowing them to change their plans or cover their tracks. It was a race against time, a silent hunt in the shadows of Ouagadougou, where every look, every word, every gesture could be a clue or a trap. The first clues came unexpectedly, through the close observation of a young officer in the Presidential Guard, recently graduated but with a keen eye. He noticed small anomalies in the behavior of one of his superiors, a respected veteran, but who lately seemed more nervous and reserved than usual, receiving nocturnal visits from unknown people and asking unusual questions about the security protocols at specific events where the president would be present. It was little, but it was a start, a loose thread in the web of conspiracy. This information, discreetly passed on to Commander Omar, triggered even closer surveillance of the suspected officer. His movements were monitored, his contacts were investigated, and slowly, the pieces of a frightening puzzle began to fall into place. The veteran appeared to be a crucial link in a network that extended far beyond what had initially been imagined, connecting seemingly disparate figures in Burkinabe society and even with contacts abroad, in capitals known for harboring exiled opponents and hostile intelligence agencies. The plotter's plan, it seemed, was not a frontal assault on the palace, which would be suicidal in the presence of North Korean commandos. Instead, they seemed to be planning something more subtle and insidious. An attack during one of the president's trips to a distant province, where security would naturally be more dispersed, and where they could exploit local discontent or the presence of armed groups to create a scenario of chaos that would mask the true objective of the operation. The discovery of this shocking new plot to eliminate Captain Ibrahim Traoré put the president's inner circle on high alert. The threat was real, sophisticated, and coming from multiple directions, testing the capabilities of his security services and the loyalty of his men to the limit. The battle for Traoré's survival and for the soul of Burkina Faso was entering a dangerous new chapter, where vigilance and cunning would be the only weapons against an enemy that moved in the shadows, determined to extinguish the flame of hope he had lit. Confirmation of a new and elaborate plot against the life of Captain Ibrahim Traoré triggered a feverish and silent counterintelligence operation in the corridors of power in Ouagadougou, a dangerous dance between hunter and prey, where any false move could be fatal. Commander Omar, with the unconditional support of the president and the discreet expertise of North Korean advisors, devised a strategy to not only thwart the impending attack, but also to unmask the entire network of conspirators, nipping the evil in the bud and exposing its hidden sponsors, whether internal or external. The presidential trip to the northwestern province of Kassi, which the conspirators planned to use as a staging ground for their attack, was kept on the official agenda, but with secret changes to the security protocols and route. It was to be a decoy, a carefully laid trap to lure the traitors and their executioners into terrain where loyal forces would have the advantage. The decision was risky, as it put the president in calculated danger, but Traoré insisted that it was the only way to expose the entire plot and send an unequivocal message to his enemies. Surveillance on the veteran officer of the Presidential Guard, who had proved to be a crucial link in the conspiracy, was intensified, but in such a way as not to arouse his suspicions. His secret meetings continued to be monitored, and through him investigators began to identify other accomplices within the security apparatus, some in surprisingly high positions, which made the situation even more delicate and dangerous. The extent of the infiltration was alarming, revealing the depth of discontent or corruption in certain quarters. In parallel, a team of communications experts loyal to Traoré began preparing an information counteroffensive, ready to be launched the moment the conspiracy was neutralized. The aim was to control the narrative, present the evidence of the plot in a clear and convincing manner to the population and the international community, and expose the motivations of the conspirators, linking them to anti-national interests and foreign powers seeking to destabilize Burkina Faso in order to plunder its resources and impose their agenda. The North Korean commandos, while maintaining their usual discretion, played a key role in planning security for the drive into Kassi province. They analyzed every detail of the route, identified potential ambush points, and prepared rapid response teams with heavy weapons and counterattack tactics. Their special operations experience and their unwavering loyalty to Traoré were additional guarantees that if the worst happened, the response would be immediate and overwhelming. In the days leading up to the trip, an almost unbearable tension hung over the presidential palace. Captain Traoré went about his daily routine with apparent calm, but his eyes reflected the gravity of the moment. He trusted his security team, but he knew that betrayal could come from where he least expected it, and that the lives of many loyal men, as well as the future of his country, depended on the success of this risky operation. It was a heavy burden for such a young leader. Omar's team managed, through a daring infiltration operation, to plant one of their agents among the foreign mercenaries who had been hired to carry out the attack. This agent, a former Burkinabe soldier posing as a disillusioned mercenary, began to provide crucial information about the conspirators' detailed plans, including the exact location of the ambush, the type of weaponry that would be used, and the planned escape routes. This information was pure gold for preparing the counter-ambush. The plotters' plan was complex. They intended to attack the presidential convoy on a narrow rural road, using explosives to block the passage, and then a coordinated attack by snipers and heavily armed men to eliminate the president and his escort. They counted on the complicity of some elements of the local security in Kassi province and on the confusion generated by the attack to allow them to escape and later, to blame rebel or extremist groups for the attack, creating a pretext for a possible seizure of power. As the date of the trip approached, the final preparations for the ambush were being finalized. Elite units of the Burkinabe army, along with a significant contingent of North Korean commandos, were secretly positioned along the route that the presidential convoy would take, hidden in the vegetation and at strategic points, ready to surround the attackers the moment the ambush was launched. It would be an inevitable confrontation, but this time, Loyalist forces would be waiting. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, on the eve of his departure, met with his trusted men, including Commander Omar and the North Korean commander, the Dragon. There were no long speeches or parting words, just a look of shared determination and the certainty that they were fighting for a just cause. The shocking new plot to eliminate the president was about to be confronted, and the fate of Burkina Faso once again hung in the balance, depending on the courage and loyalty of those who refused to see hope extinguished. The morning of the trip to Kassi province dawned with a deceptive clarity, the African sun rising on the horizon as if oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface of the capital. The presidential convoy, seemingly normal in its composition but secretly reinforced and with altered security protocols, set off from the palace towards the northwest, with every kilometer traveled bringing the inevitable confrontation closer. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, seated in the lead vehicle, maintained a serene expression, but his senses were heightened, his mind going over every detail of the counter-ambush plan, aware of the risks and the importance of that day. The first part of the journey passed without incident, the arid and beautiful landscape of Burkina Faso appearing through the armored windows of the vehicles. Commander Omar, in a discreet but heavily armed car, a few positions behind the president, maintained constant contact with the surveillance units and ambush teams positioned along the route. The agent infiltrated among the mercenaries confirmed that the conspirators were in their positions, waiting for the right moment to strike, unaware of the trap that was closing in on them. As the convoy approached the designated ambush area, a winding country road surrounded by dense vegetation that provided ideal cover for snipers, the tension grew with each passing moment. The drivers of the presidential vehicles, all seasoned and loyal veterans, kept a steady speed, following the precise instructions they had been given. They knew they were walking into the den of hell, but they trusted in the plan and in the ability of their comrades to neutralize the threat. The radio silence of the security team was broken by the calm but firm voice of the undercover agent. "They are ready. The signal will be given shortly." It was the last warning. Seconds later, a deafening explosion echoed across the landscape, and a column of smoke and dust rose in front of the convoy, blocking the road. The ambush had begun. Gunfire began to rain down on the vehicles from multiple directions, the sharp sound of sniper rifles mixing with the rattle of machine guns. But instead of the panic and disorganization that the conspirators had expected, the presidential convoy's response was immediate and coordinated. Armored vehicles formed a defensive circle around the president's car, while security guards and North Korean commandos who were part of the escort quickly disembarked, returning fire with deadly precision. Intensive training and meticulous preparation were paying off, turning what should have been a massacre into a balanced confrontation. At the same moment, the elite units of the Burkinabe army and other North Korean commandos, who had been secretly positioned in the hills and surrounding vegetation, sprang into action. They emerged from their hiding places like ghosts, surrounding the attackers from behind and on the flanks, taking them completely by surprise. What the mercenaries and traitor soldiers thought would be an easy ambush turned into a death trap for themselves. The gunfire became intense, the air vibrating with the sound of bullets and grenade explosions. The North Korean commandos, with their discipline and impeccable aim, advanced methodically, neutralizing enemy snipers and coordinating their movements with the Burkinabe troops. Commander Omar, at the center of the action, led his men bravely, ensuring that the perimeter around the president remained secure and that the attackers had no chance to get close. The veteran officer of the Presidential Guard, who was one of the leaders of the traitorous faction on the ground, saw his plans crumble before his eyes. Instead of a quick victory, he found himself surrounded, his men falling one by one under the heavy fire of the loyalist forces. Despair took over his face as he realized that he had been tricked, that his treason had been discovered, and that there would be no escape. He tried to organize a retreat, but it was too late. The confrontation lasted about 30 minutes, which seemed like an eternity to those involved. The superiority in numbers and tactics of the Loyalist forces, combined with the element of surprise from the counter-ambush, sealed the fate of the conspirators. One by one, the attackers were neutralized, killed, or captured. The few who tried to flee were intercepted by the blocking units that had been positioned along the escape routes. The operation had been a complete success. When the last shot had ceased and tense silence returned to the landscape, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the orders of the officers, Captain Ibrahim Traoré emerged from his vehicle, unharmed but with a grim face. He surveyed the scene of the battle, the bodies of traitors and mercenaries strewn across the ground, and the relief in his eyes mingled with sadness at the violence and betrayal that had once again threatened his country. The victory was bitter, but necessary. Commander Omar approached, his uniform stained with dust and sweat, but with a gleam of duty fulfilled in his eyes. "It is over, Mr. President. The threat has been neutralized." Traoré nodded, placing a hand on the shoulder of his loyal security chief. "Thanks to you, Omar, and to all the brave men and women who fought today. But the battle is not over yet. Now we must find the masterminds behind this plot, those who lurk in the shadows and finance the treason. They too will pay for their crimes." With the ambush foiled and the perpetrators of the plot dead or captured in Kasi province, the second phase of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's counterintelligence operation went into action immediately, like a precision mechanism activated at the precise moment. While the security forces were still consolidating the situation at the scene of the confrontation, ensuring the safety of the president and gathering crucial evidence, in Ouagadougou and other key cities in the country, special teams were already on the move, ready to arrest the masterminds and the main articulators of the plot, those who had pulled the strings behind the scenes. The information obtained through the undercover agent, preliminary interrogations of those captured, and surveillance of the traitorous officer in the Presidential Guard had provided Commander Omar with a detailed map of the conspiratorial network. The names of prominent politicians from the former elite, businessmen dissatisfied with the policies of nationalizing resources, high-ranking military officers who harbored ambitions for power, and even some religious leaders who opposed the secularism of Traoré's government were on the list of those involved, revealing the breadth and diversity of the coalition seeking to overthrow him. The arrests were carried out quickly and in a coordinated manner, during the early hours of the morning following the failed attack, catching the conspirators by surprise in their luxurious residences or discreet hideouts. There was no time for them to react, destroy evidence, or flee the country. Burkinabe Special Forces, with tactical support and discreet supervision from some North Korean commandos, surrounded the premises, carried out the arrests and seized documents, computers and large sums of money that would be used to finance the destabilization. At the same time as the arrests were taking place, the information counteroffensive prepared by Traoré's team was launched in full force. An official government statement announced the assassination attempt on the president and its thwarting by the security forces, praising the bravery of loyal soldiers and denouncing the treacherous nature of the conspiracy. Hard evidence, such as recordings of compromising conversations, testimonies from some of those captured, and documents linking the conspirators to foreign interests, began to be released to the national and international media. The Burkinabe population reacted with shock and indignation, followed by an overwhelming wave of support for Captain Traoré. Thousands of people took to the streets in spontaneous demonstrations, condemning the traitors and reaffirming their loyalty to the president who, for many, represented the hope for a better and more just future. The attempt to eliminate him, rather than weaken him, seemed to have further strengthened his ties with the people, who saw in him a courageous leader willing to risk his life for the nation. The international community, for its part, reacted with a mixture of caution and selective condemnation. Some countries and organizations expressed solidarity with the Burkina Faso government and condemned the coup attempt, while others, especially those who had been implicated in Traoré's allegations as sponsors of the conspiracy, tried to downplay the incident or question the veracity of the evidence presented, accusing the president of using the situation to repress the opposition and consolidate his power in an authoritarian manner. But Traoré's narrative, backed by evidence and popular outcry, was powerful. The image of a young African leader fighting for his country's sovereignty against corrupt and predatory internal and external forces resonated deeply not only in Burkina Faso but across the continent and among social justice advocates around the world. The attempt to eliminate him had backfired on his enemies, exposing their dirty tactics and strengthening Traoré's legitimacy. In the days that followed, interrogations of the prisoners revealed even more shocking details about the conspiracy. It turned out that the plan went beyond the assassination of the president. It included the installation of a puppet government aligned with neocolonial interests that would reverse all of Traoré's reforms, privatize natural resources, and plunge the country back into corruption and dependence. There were also plans for a bloody repression against Traoré's supporters and the dissolution of social movements and trade unions that defended the rights of the people. The discovery of the depth and cruelty of the plot only increased Captain Traoré's determination to bring all those involved to justice. He promised the nation that there would be no impunity for traitors, regardless of their position or influence. Special courts were established to try the conspirators, ensuring a fair but speedy trial so that the truth would come out and justice would be served, and serving as an example to anyone who dared to undermine sovereignty and democracy in Burkina Faso. The thwarting of this new and sophisticated conspiracy represented a crucial victory for Ibrahim Traoré and the Burkinabe people. It demonstrated the effectiveness of their security services, the loyalty of much of their armed forces, and the importance of strategic alliances, such as that with the North Korean commandos, who had played a silent but vital role in protecting the president and neutralizing the threat. More than that, it reinforced the conviction that the fight for true independence was arduous and dangerous, but worth fighting for. Captain Traoré knew that his enemies would not give up easily, that new attempts at destabilization could arise in the future. But he also knew that with each thwarted conspiracy, with each betrayal unmasked, he became stronger, and his people more united and determined to defend the gains they had made. The battle for the soul of Burkina Faso would continue, but the flame of hope, which the conspirators had tried so violently to extinguish, now burned brighter than ever, illuminating the path to a future of dignity and self-determination. After the conspiracy was neutralized and its main architects were arrested, Captain Ibrahim Traoré emerged not only as a survivor but as an even stronger and more legitimized leader in the eyes of his people and a significant part of the international community that was watching the events in Burkina Faso with growing interest. The attempt to eliminate him, paradoxically, served to expose the predatory nature of his opponents and to solidify the narrative that he was a genuine defender of national sovereignty against internal and external forces that wished to keep the country in a state of submission and exploitation. The government's response to the crisis was marked by a combination of firmness and a call for national unity. As the legal proceedings against the conspirators continued, with the promise of transparency and due process, Traoré used his speeches to urge the population to remain vigilant but also not to give in to fear or division. He emphasized that Burkina Faso's true strength lay in the cohesion of its people and their ability to resist attempts to sow ethnic, religious, or political discord. The revelations about the extent of the conspiracy, including the involvement of prominent figures from the former elite and foreign agents, sparked a profound debate in Burkinabe society about the need for deeper structural reforms to eradicate the roots of corruption and betrayal. The population demanded not only punishment for the guilty, but also concrete measures to ensure that such plots would not be repeated, such as strengthening democratic institutions, greater transparency in the management of public resources, and the creation of mechanisms for citizen control over the government. Captain Traoré, sensitive to this popular outcry, announced a series of new initiatives aimed at deepening reforms and consolidating what he called the Revolution of Dignity. These included the creation of a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate past crimes and promote the healing of social wounds, the launch of an ambitious civic education program to strengthen democratic and patriotic values, and the intensification of the fight against corruption at all levels of public administration, with zero tolerance for the misappropriation of resources. Traoré's image as an incorruptible leader dedicated to the well-being of his people was reinforced by events. His personal courage in facing the ambush, his determination to bring the traitors to justice, and his vision of a more just and sovereign future for Burkina Faso inspired fervent loyalty among his supporters and even grudging respect among some of his more moderate critics. He became a symbol of a new generation of African leaders, willing to break with the past and build a different future for their countries. The cooperation with the North Korean commandos, which had been crucial in foiling the plot, remained a topic of debate, but the effectiveness of their actions and their unwavering loyalty to the president silenced many of the domestic critics. For most Burkinabes, they were seen as silent heroes who had helped save the nation from a terrible fate. Their presence, though still discreet, became a factor of stability and a constant reminder of Traoré's determination to ensure the country's security by any means necessary. On the international stage, the foiling of the conspiracy also had significant repercussions. The Western powers that had been implicitly accused by Traoré of involvement in the plot found themselves on the defensive, denying any involvement but facing increasing skepticism from global public opinion and from other nations. The credibility of their policies towards Africa was shaken, and Traoré's image as a leader who resisted outside interference gained even more strength. Other African leaders, inspired by Traoré's resilience and his handling of the crisis, sought to strengthen their own security and counterintelligence mechanisms, learning from Burkina Faso's experience. The idea of greater South-South security cooperation and less reliance on Western partners gained new momentum, with Traoré emerging as an influential voice in this debate, arguing for the need for Africa to take control of its own destiny. Despite the victory over the conspirators, Captain Traoré knew that the challenges were not over. Poverty, insecurity in some regions due to extremist groups, and external economic pressures remained serious problems that required urgent and sustainable solutions. But overcoming this internal crisis had renewed the energy of the government and the people, creating a sense of optimism and possibility that had not been seen in Burkina Faso for a long time. The shocking new plot to eliminate Captain Ibrahim Traoré had failed in its primary objective, but it had succeeded, paradoxically, in strengthening his leadership, uniting his people, and exposing the fragility of the old systems of power that were desperately trying to maintain their hold on Africa. The battle for the soul of Burkina Faso would continue, but the nation, led by its courageous young captain, was more determined than ever to move forward, building a future of dignity, sovereignty, and hope, against all odds. The wake of the failed conspiracy left a complex and multifaceted legacy for Captain Ibrahim Traoré and for Burkina Faso, a legacy that went far beyond the simple victory over internal and external enemies. The crisis, although traumatic, served as a catalyst for a deepening of social and political transformations in the country, accelerating the process of popular awareness and strengthening the government's determination to pursue a path of autonomy and social justice, even in the face of formidable and persistent obstacles. One of the most significant consequences was the increase in citizen participation in the country's political life. The perception that the nation was on the brink of an abyss, and that only vigilance and popular unity could prevent future catastrophes, mobilized sectors of society that had previously remained apathetic or distant. Popular vigilance committees emerged in neighborhoods and villages, not as armed militias, but as spaces for debate, monitoring the actions of local government and denouncing corrupt or anti-democratic practices. Captain Traoré, rather than fearing this popular unrest, encouraged it, seeing it as a fundamental pillar for the consolidation of the revolution of dignity. He held regular meetings with representatives of these committees, listening to their demands, criticisms, and suggestions, and seeking to incorporate their perspectives into the decision-making process. This openness, rare in leaders facing such pressure, helped to build a relationship of trust and shared responsibility between the government and the population. The need to strengthen state institutions also became a top priority. The infiltration of traitors into the security apparatus and other levels of public administration had revealed vulnerabilities that urgently needed to be addressed. Traoré initiated a profound reform of the armed forces and intelligence services, promoting loyal and competent officers, investing in training and equipment, and implementing more rigorous internal control mechanisms to prevent corruption and undue politicization of these crucial institutions. In the economic field, The coup attempt reinforced Traoré's conviction that national sovereignty necessarily involved achieving economic autonomy. He intensified efforts to diversify the economy, reduce dependence on raw material exports, and strengthen the domestic market. Programs to support family farming, encourage local industrialization, and develop renewable energy were expanded, seeking to create a more endogenous, sustainable development model that was less vulnerable to the fluctuations and pressures of the global market. The relationship with North Korean commandos, which had proved so vital during the crisis, remained a central element of Traoré's security strategy, but it also evolved. In addition to the president's personal protection, cooperation began to extend to training elite Burkinabe units in counterterrorism and asymmetric warfare tactics, areas in which the North Koreans had considerable expertise and which were crucial to countering the threats from extremist groups that still operated in parts of the country. This partnership, however, continued to be a point of friction in Burkina Faso's relations with Western powers. Traoré, however, remained firm in his position, arguing that his country's security was a sovereign responsibility and that he would seek cooperation wherever it was offered on terms of mutual respect and without conditions that would harm national interests. He used the hypocrisy of some of these powers, who criticized his alliance with Pyongyang while maintaining relations with other authoritarian regimes, to delegitimize his criticisms. The legacy of the failed conspiracy also manifested itself in a new cultural and intellectual effervescence in Burkina Faso. Artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers began to explore in their work the themes of betrayal, resistance, sovereignty, and the search for an authentic national identity. Cinema, in particular, which already had a rich tradition in the country, found in Traoré and recent events a source of inspiration for narratives that celebrated popular heroism and questioned colonial and neocolonial narratives. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, aware of the power of culture in shaping national consciousness, supported these initiatives, seeing them as a way to strengthen the spirit of resistance and build a shared vision of the future. He knew that the battle for the soul of Burkina Faso was not just fought in the political and military arenas, but also in the arena of ideas, narratives, and symbols that shape the identity of a people and their ability to dream and fight for their dreams. Despite all his achievements and overcoming the crisis, Traoré remained a pragmatic leader, aware of the challenges that still lay ahead. Endemic poverty, social inequalities, security threats, and external pressures would not disappear overnight. But the experience of the failed conspiracy had taught him valuable lessons about the importance of unity, vigilance, resilience, and the need to trust in the strength and wisdom of his own people. The shock of the new plot to eliminate him had become a catalyst for a new cycle of hope and transformation in Burkina Faso. The nation, although still marked by the scars of betrayal, looked to the future with renewed determination, led by a captain who had proven, once again, that he was willing to give his life for the dignity and sovereignty of his people, and that, with the support of unexpected allies and the strength of his people, he was capable of overcoming the most terrible adversities. We have reached the end of this intense narrative about the conspiracy against Captain Ibrahim Traoré and its profound consequences. A story that shows us how adversity can sometimes forge a path to even greater strength and renewed hope. If this saga of intrigue, loyalty, and resilience has captured your attention, we invite you to join our community by subscribing to the channel. Your like is a great incentive for us to continue producing content that explores the complexities of our world, and your comments are always welcome. What did you think of the way Traoré and his people overcame this crisis? What lessons can we learn from this experience? Thank you very much for listening and for following us so far.